Merkel Media.
I'm exhausted, looking for everything in the shadows. Start looking at people like they don't matter. I'm waking up to the fact, more than a little bit shallow. I'm lost down this hole, but I don't wanna. I'm lost down this hole, 'cause I'm just trying to
What's good, guys? We are back with another episode of Free the Rabbits, and we have Cryptids of the Corn back at it, back in action here on the show. And I actually hit Justin up over the weekend because he's going to be at Frogman Festival here in Lower Ohio, and I'm going to see him here in a week. We were talking a little bit about that, but I also hit him up because I wanted to do an episode about aliens. And we've done an episode in the past about different alien types, but I wanted to do something a little different today. And we've touched on it before, but we've never done an episode about it. And I don't know too many people that discuss it in this way. You'll see people talk about it here and there, specifically when it comes to the Greys. But we want to talk about this phenomena of all of these quote unquote extraterrestrials interacting with humans. Some of it's been documented as far back as we know of cave drawings, but these aliens who, for some odd reason, guys, all look like us in some way. Very humanoid. Some of them have big eyes, big heads. Some of them don't. Some of them look almost exactly like us, maybe just a little taller, but they all have a specific set of abilities that are tailored to each kind. And I thought it would be very interesting to talk about that today. One, talk about from a biological aspect, how it could work, how it doesn't work. I'm sure Jay will have some sort of off-the-wall clone explanation for some of this stuff too. And I've got some really interesting tie-ins to some known occultists. And I find it fascinating, guys, that anytime these beings show up, it's always initially with somebody who's involved with the occult or New Age or some psychic or whatever, right? It's never like just some regular person. I'm not saying regular people don't get abducted and all that. That happens as well. But when you track a lot of those people, they have some sort of tie to occult practices. They've either been playing with Ouija boards or tarot cards or something, or somebody close to them is doing something as well. So there has to be something there. And I think we're going to explore that today. But before we get into anything, for the people that might not know who you are, let them know who you are. Let them know what you got going on. Talk about your book because it's phenomenal. I've got my copy right here. And for people on YouTube or Rumble, you can take a look. This is the premier modern book about organic UFOs.
It is the book at the moment on the market for organic UFOs. Living UFOs, The Oceans Above Our Head, a study of atmospheric biology by Justin England.
Here you read it. What else we got going on?
Well, we have, like he said, Frogman Festival coming up here soon. We've got Ohio Bigfoot Jamboree in October coming up later in the year.
Mm-hmm.
And then all the other fun festivals. And
Squonkapalooza will be at, and Hocking Hills Bigfoot Festival will be at.
Right. Again, later in the year, August and
we have
September.
2 live shows coming up.
Yes, live show in April in Arkansas.
April 5th, North Little Rock, right?
Mm-hmm. With Drunken Cryptids podcast. I'm Matthew Orton.
Yeah. And then Michael in May.
Michael Thompson and June in Ada, Ohio. June is at 15th, I think. Tickets, you can get tickets to both events online on our website at cryptsofthecorn.com. Come see us live.
Anything else? We may start a museum, and there may be a museum fund.
That's behind the scenes things.
Well, now they know.
Okay, now they know.
But yeah, I think Crypts of Corn podcast. Find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. More scientific and magical thing combined. I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wait a minute. So you're starting a museum?
Maybe.
Well, that seems very convenient because you have a J-clone who works at the Smithsonian. So what are you guys going to be showcasing at this museum?
How giants didn't exist and all of the bones are actually Megalosaurus bones.
We display what we want to, what the narrative calls for at the time.
I love it.
Gosh.
Oh, man. Well, let's jump right into it, guys. And I know we've talked briefly over the weekend, kind of how we're going to tailor this. And I'll jump right in with our first being, and I'm going to call them beings. And I know that there are many people out there touting that these are extraterrestrials. I think the narrative's starting to shift, though, even from the government, that it's more interdimensional at this point. So I think people are buying more into that part of it. However, there are a lot of people who still believe that these particular types of aliens are from other planets, and maybe they are. We don't actually know, but I don't think they're rooted in a good place, a lot of these. And we've got the biologist here to help us navigate why some of this doesn't make a lot of sense from a biological standpoint. But we'll start with the first type, the Sassani, and the meaning. And again, these meanings of these words are being dictated by the beings themselves. And I actually did a little research on some of the etymology on some of these words, which I'll talk about today, which it's very interesting when you dig in some of the ancient texts, when you're looking at Aramaic or Hebrew or something, and you pull up the word and you said, whoa, that's not really what that word means, but it does mean something weird. But the Sassani, the meaning is beings of light. So that's already a red flag for me. As soon as entities start calling themselves beings of light, they're the light bringers, the light givers, the Lucifers, essentially is what I hear whenever I hear beings of light. They're a humanoid extraterrestrial race who lives on the planet Essani near the Orion constellation, approximately 500 light years from Earth. It is believed they are a genetic hybrid between an Earth human and a Zeta Reticulan, which Zeta Reticulans are gray aliens. Those are just one of the names that is given to those particular type of beings. The Sassani possess a combination of the best characteristics of the two races. They had the Zeta's telepathic abilities, longevity, sensitivity, scientific and intellectual capacities, as well as humanity's vital, emotional, sexual, and physical aspects. They also possess the very human curiosity and the predilection for speedy advancement. They are very likable, rich with humor, and fluid in their emotions. They're about 5 feet tall with grayish skin. Only the females have hair, which is white, with some exceptions. Their heads are not as big proportionately as the grays, and their eyes are still large. So the first Sassani representative was Bashar, and Bashar means messenger. Now, this is dictated from Bashar, this particular Sassani, and has been communicating to Earth and given many information for many years through a man called Yah-El. Anka. And Anka's a very interesting character, and I know we're going to talk about him in a second. But when I was looking at Bashar, it's an alternate name for the Yankem language, which is spoken in Nigeria's Plateau State. The language is nearly extinct, with only a few elderly people still fluent. So it's a language that's not even really spoken of. But when you look at the word Bashar, it's derived from the Arabic letters Ba, Shin, Ra, and it has the same linguistic derivation as the Hebrew word basar. And this is interesting, which means flesh, meat, or human body. So I thought that was interesting because of my Nephilim portal baby theory and how you've got these meat sacks that are being inhabited by these entities, which I don't think all of them are. I think some of them are just entities that are shape-shifting and probably from a metaphysical standpoint taking on whatever likeness that they want to. But I thought that was really interesting. And to get to Yah-El Anka, he's a spiritual medium who claims to channel an enlightened extraterrestrial entity named Bashar. He's also the cousin of 1960s teen idol Paul Anka. If you know anything about Paul Anka, he did songs like Diana, You Are My Destiny, Lonely Boy, Put Your Head on My Shoulder. He did all those. He actually wrote for Frank Sinatra and Michael Jackson as well. And he wrote the theme song for The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. So very famous guy. As a matter of fact, Yah-El Anka, the one who is the medium who met with Bashar, he is a special effects guy in Hollywood. He's actually been on some major films as well. So he was the lead on all these special effects. So he's deep into Hollywood, and his cousin is a very famous singer as well. So again, that Hollywood connection that we're seeing too, where you see a lot of weird rituals and stuff come out of Hollywood, I thought that was interesting. So what do you guys think about this Yah-El Anka and the Sassani? Hey guys, before we get back into the show, I just want to let people know who have been asking how they can donate to the show to help with the show's growth. You can become a member here on YouTube. There are 3 different tiers. There is Nephilim Portal Babies, there is Nephilim Hunter, and Good Nephilim. Each one of them have a few different things that come along with them, but the one thing that comes with all of them is custom emojis that you can use in the live chats and in the comments below. I really appreciate all the love you guys have been showing. And listen, if you can't become a member, just you donating your time is one of the best gifts that you can give this channel. For now, let's get back into the show.
All right. You want to go first or you want me to go first?
Just that tie between talent in Hollywood and how just it seems the circles are just always small. But it's this weird side of it, that the weird connection when it comes to stuff like this. Those connections are the oddest ones to me when it comes to Hollywood.
Well, it's like they know how to act.
Right, yeah.
No, the top of my notes is literally the Sassani. That dude is nuts.
Okay.
The David Anka.
Oh, okay.
That's literally the title of my little note page. No, watching him, I watched a bunch of his videos last night. And you definitely, it mix, I don't know, just.
Oh, is this the channeler guy?
Yeah, this is the channeler guy, right?
From YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he's the one, if you type in the Sassani, you're going to get 500 of his videos.
Yep, that's who yep.
And then half of his videos to me seem like that classic medium almost style to where playing off the audience. He's great, though, if you watch him, because he'll tell you no, and this is how you really feel. And then everybody's like, you know what? Right, you're right. And, he's the... No and or no but, not yes anding.
Oh, gotcha.
Which is different than a lot of mediums. Anyways, no, the Sassani are weird. Hearing Joel describe them, I just want to punch them. I just want to punch these little creatures. Every one of them on this list we're going to talk about today. I just want to punch them.
And there's a lot of channelers online and people who do that sort of stuff. And it's weird with all these different alien groups because I've seen ones for that kind of claim they're receiving messages from different groups or different entities, but it's across the board almost the exact same idea or messages they're all conveying. And they don't always all seem like evil or negative or anything. I mean, for the most part, it seems like good, positive stuff. But once I realized multiple people were saying the same thing, yet all claiming to be from separate entities, that was a little weird to me.
I mean, it's like I think of it like politicians.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll give you the good so they can sneak in the bad. But anything so like Joel was talking about, light bringers. Right?
Yeah.
That's an angelic title pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know from my reading and everything like that, angels are never afraid to mention that they're angels.
Mm-hmm.
They don't go around the back end and do all this weird back and forth of, no, we're light bringers. We're these, we're guardians. Be not afraid,
Bringers of the dawn.
Yeah, no, they look like stars, they are angels. So this whole thing, I mean, these type of entities, these big-eyed hair, we've had people on our show that have talked about it that weren't Christians and prayed when they were dealing with these type of entities, and they coil away. It's just saying, if you're an interdimensional extraterrestrial being and you're really, really scared of Jesus, that's, that probably says something. But no, the Sassani being a hybrid, it's like in the Zeta Reticuli thing, like the classic gray, which this isn't exactly the classic gray, a little different, but
right. Although one of the channelers in one of the videos I watched said they were referred to as grays.
I could see it. Like they look,
but then he quickly turned around and says, but not the modern. He said, throughout time we've been known as the grays, but not the modern version.
Gosh,
it's like, oh, okay. He snuck that in right at the end real fast.
This just seems like both sides. Like I think they're real. I think maybe these people are actually talking to something. At least some of them. David. I just forgot his name already.
Help us out, Joel.
What's his name?
Anka. Daryl.
Anka.
Yeah.
I almost said the other guy we're going to talk about later.
Sims.
Daryl.
Yeah.
Daryl Sims been on the show many times, the alien hunter, and he kind of talks about the Greys as made beings, like Joel has in the past. These drones, because he, as a kid, he fought one and hit it in the face, and the eye cover came off.
Oh, he grabbed the eye cover and pulled it off. Yeah.
Anyways, I don't know. I think any entity kind of doing this back and forth around the way to talk to people and do these weird things. I mean, angels, if you're claiming, and I'm not saying these things have claimed to be angels, light bringers is just kind of, for me, synonymous with an angel or an angelic being in a way. So you're claiming that angels don't go this back around weird way. They don't want you to go make a public spectacle and charge $50, $100 for a ticket to fill a room so you can talk to them and say that you were a gray in a different life.
Or to get your YouTube numbers up.
Yeah. I don't know. It just, and I don't know that guy. I mean, I really don't. It just, I just have hard feelings, I guess, about that kind of thing. Especially when I think that if he may not be lying, he may be believing what he is telling them.
Yeah, he may be
being lied
receiving.
to.
He may be receiving transmissions.
Yeah. But no, I don't think they're good, and I really don't. I don't think they're good. I don't think anything we're going to talk about today is probably a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I tend to go with what you guys just said when it comes to Daryl Anka. I know that there's a large portion of people who think that he's a charlatan and he's manipulating people for money. I mean, he is charging $99 to show up at his events where he teaches people how to connect to the Sassani, and he has Bashar speak through him while he's there. So he will have this entity take over, and he will tell people things about themselves that only they know, which is very weird. Also, this entity knows a lot about science, and it really, and I'm going to talk about that here in a second, that really ties into the fact that Daryl Anka's not a scientist, so he wouldn't know these precise geometric sizes and planet distances and light speeds, and they all match up. That's the crazy thing. That's the one thing that the detractors can't really understand that he's able to come up with. So I do believe that he's talking to something and he believes what they're telling him. So I don't think that he's lying on that front. Now, is he being lied to by whatever's talking to him? More than likely. And I think as we go through this episode today, we'll see more and more how that works. Now, one of the interesting things about Anka was in 1973, he had a close encounter of the first kind with a black triangular UFO. And black triangular UFOs are tied directly to the Sassani. So they travel in these ships. Funny enough, their symbol is also a triangle.
I had that in my notes to bring up.
That's tied into many, many different aspects of the occult. But Anka actually talks about it and said, I had a close range, broad daylight sighting of UFOs with witnesses present both times. At each sighting, we saw a dark, metallic, triangular craft about 30 feet on each side. There were 3 blue-white lights, one on each point, one orange-red light in the center. The craft in the first sighting was about 150 feet away, and the second sighting only about 60 feet away. So it kept getting closer. So 10 years later, he hasn't met Bashar yet. He doesn't even know about the Sassani, but he's had 2 major UFO sightings. 10 years later, he meets a channeler and he begins to study the practice. And through the practice, he becomes attuned to an extraterrestrial presence named Bashar. And he describes Bashar as existing in a parallel reality in a time frame that we perceive as the future. So this goes to that idea when people start talking about Greys or any of these other aliens that look kind of like us. I see it in comments all the time. They're from the future. So it's like, it trips me out that that's an actual belief system that people are believing because these things are telling them that. First off, I'm going to be very reticent if something's just popping up telling me anything. I find it fascinating that people just believe these things immediately and they don't take the time to actually look into what they possibly could be. And he says that Bashar covers in the dialogue with him a wide range of topics, including, number 1, spirituality. Why are these things talking about spiritual things? Why is this the first thing they go to? And when it comes to Jesus, they have a couple narratives. Either he didn't exist or he's one of them. He was an alien. He was one of these beings. They try to tie it into that all the time. And they talk about planetary advancement, classic, we're here to make the planet better, sacred geometry, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute, which is important, metaphysics, and extraterrestrial life. Now, Bashar's supposed reasons for contact is that he says, we are interacting with you to share certain perspectives that may give you an opportunity to see within yourself more of what it is you contain, to know more about yourselves, to allow us to reflect to you certain ideas you may already know, perhaps the civilization have forgotten about. So they're here to help us remember. They're here to help teach us the way. They've been teaching us the way since the beginning of time, which isn't false if we know exactly what they actually are. But yes, I do think that these particular entities are not good. They present themselves as good. And to Jay's point, they may do good things. They may have this presentation of we're helping, but they're leading you down a path that's going to end in destruction.
Right. Like that false sense of security. They're just giving you that initial trust. And then once they're in, they got you at that point.
I mean, demons do that a lot.
Right. Yeah.
And they talk about, I mean, I didn't say that word, but negative entities a lot of times will help you out, make your life easy, show you the easiest paths because it's easier to keep you into their plans if you're comfortable and happy.
I wonder if too, just like modern day, or at least the modern version of it, I think human beings now, just the way we live and like with our government and stuff, the way we structure civilization, might be a void there that people are yearning for when it comes to spirituality and when it comes 100%. To just living life or even discovering more about yourself. I think because we're stuck in the 9 to 5, the paradigm of working for a living and living to work basically, and you're missing that part. I think people are just missing that part of life that they're just yearning for. So these guys are filling in that void and then taking that energy away because you feel like you're getting that outlet through them or something.
We've talked a lot about that with witchcraft and other things that I do believe we are biologically programmed to be a religious species. And I'm a Christian, so I believe we're programmed to want that relationship with God. And in the modern society, it's just so much. There's so many options, and it's so easier to get led astray and feel that it's like junk food versus a nice steak dinner.
Right. Yeah.
Like a lot of those other things will, like this stuff, may fill that spiritual need for a short period of time.
But it's not the real thing.
But then you're paying $100 to see this guy 3 times a week.
Right.
It's just saying, I don't know. It's just weird to me that how much of that there is with this stuff, the religious push. Like we talked about it with Jesus, like Joel said a minute ago. We've covered several abductions where aliens are like, because a guy is praying or talking about God or whatever, and they're like, Jesus wasn't real. Then finally, like, he was one of us.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, after like an hour. And they're like, just trying to get him to shut up about it.
Right, yeah.
I'm like, well, why didn't you say that at the beginning?
Well,
I don't know. I just want to punch these things.
Yeah, they're not good.
Yeah. And I'm with you 100% on that. And you're right. There's been a big shift, I'd say in the past 15 years, where spirituality's become more of a thing. Now, I know if we go back to Alice Bailey, which I talked about on the Lucius Trust episode, and we'll bring up a little bit about theosophy today because that's directly tied to these beings too. But when she coined the term New Age, that was when there was a shift into this, I can ascend. All I have to do is connect to these entities. I can ascend. I can essentially become a god. It's Gnosticism 101. And it was just a new format for that. And what it does is it takes the responsibility off of yourself to a higher being, which is God that created it all. So it alleviates the idea of sin and a moral compass in a lot of ways, even though people will push back on that and say, no, I'm moral. Well, you might be in a lot of ways, but you're also alleviating that part of yourself because, hey, if you get it wrong, you're just going to reincarnate and come back as something else, or you might evolve into one of these beings if you're able to break through the quote unquote matrix, or like Plato talks about the theory of forms. You've broken through that and you've gotten to that next level. Now you become one of those gods. And that's the tale as old as time. That's essentially what Lucifer has been trying to spin to mankind since the beginning. You don't need God. You can become God. You can be what Jesus was, because Jesus was just a good prophet. He had powers, and he was just one of these ascended masters. And this is exactly what these beings are. They all come off as these ascended masters here to teach us. And it ties directly into, we were talking about sacred geometry. And sacred geometry ascribes symbolic and sacred meanings to certain geometric shapes and certain geometric proportions. It is associated with the belief of divine creator of the universal geometer. The geometry used in the design and construction of religious structures such as churches, temples, mosques. You'll see it in pagodas, holy wells, mandala gardens, all these different things. You'll see this geometry, right? And I believe, like Plato said, God geometrizes continually. And that's the idea that God created the universe according to a geometric plan. Well, what are these beings always talking about? Everything's in shapes. Why are they always in triangles? Always. There's some sort of triangular motion, these ships. And everything that they do has a certain order to it. Now, they may be trying to create chaos from God's order, by disrupting it, but they're going to come with an ordered system because that's how the universe is placed, is in this sacred geometry. And that's why you're going to see the Freemasons, any of these secret societies, everything's built on geometry and building, because this is the knowledge that was given to us from these beings. And we can go all the way back to the book of Enoch, when these angelic beings were teaching mankind all of these different things, and astrology being one of them. And you see that come up in the New Age constantly, is astrology. What's your sign? Oh, if this sign connects with this sign, it becomes this. And there's some truth to it, because at the end of the day, you can go all the way back to the Mazzaroth and like the earliest zodiac, which I believe that there is like a true zodiac, which the Mazzaroth talks about, and the stars that shows the coming of Christ. But I think it was also corrupted. And I think now we use it to give ourselves power. Oh, if I do this on this date, and the moon shining here, and I got this sign, then I can unlock this. It's what is taught in all of these New Age sects, but it's also what these entities are teaching people. And we can go right back to Bashar and his seemingly immense knowledge of the universe, how far away star systems are, all of these things, how big planets are, how many people live on his planet. All these things tie into that. And I don't think that that's a mistake. I think that that is by design. And I think we can even look to the Bible to talk about how that sacred geometry works. We can look at Ezekiel 1, which talks about the cherubim or cherubs, and I'll start at verse 5. And I thought this was very interesting. Also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, and everyone had 4 faces, and everyone had 4 wings, and their feet were straight feet, and the sole of their feet were like the sole of a calf's foot. They sparkled like the color of burnished brass. And they had the hands of a man under their wings on the side, on their 4 sides, and their 4 had their faces in their wings. Their wings were joined one to another. They turned not when they went. They went every one straight forward. As for the likeness of their faces, they 4 had the face of a man, the face of a lion on the right side. They 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. They 4 also had the face of an eagle. Thus were the faces, and their wings were stretched upward. 2 wings of every one were joined one to another, and 2 covered their bodies. Now, I thought it was interesting when they talked about the direction of their faces, and I heard this before when I was talking to Ward, who I do the films with, that this is how their faces are always placed. It's always looking a specific way, the way that these cherubim operate. So if we're looking at these entities, and we're saying that they are some derivative of these angelic beings, possibly even the angelic beings themselves, because I think angels can shapeshift, so they could be shapeshifting into these beings, that they would understand the geometry because they were created by the geometry, by the real geometry of the universe. And you know, that's something that you and I talk about all the time, Justin, is the construct of the way that the universe was created. It's in perfect order. It works a certain way because it is built by 100%. A type of geometry. And I think that that's why these beings come with a certain type of order when they're trying to teach mankind, because it's what they know. They might be corrupting it, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And I think that that's exactly what these beings are doing. And Bashar, the Sassani, is specifically talking about sacred geometry and how the order of the universe works, and how that he and the other Sassani can teach mankind how to ascend by using this geometry, really a corrupted version of it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the way I explain it to people that aren't really into this, it's kind of like computer programming. When God built the universe, he was very, very meticulous with, I guess you'd say, the code. And these beings, you know, being a higher level of existence, I guess, than we are, they can see behind the code and show you how to manipulate it. You know, it's probably not the best thing to be doing, because it's very, like gravity. We talked about that before. And nobody knows what gravity actually is, but the force of gravity holding us to the ground, like if you drop something. if gravity was, I think it's half of 1% higher or half of 1% less, that life couldn't have formed. Like our cell walls would have trouble staying together and stuff like that. Just to show you how perfect everything is designed, like the tidal force of the moon, and the moon is a super weird thing to be placed in our, in our orbit. It's perfectly balanced, perfectly built. Like you're saying, the sacred side of it, and these beings, which I do not believe are good things, are just showing you they're showing you the cheat codes.
Now, you don't think we're just some random speck of dust in the vastness of space that perfectly formed a space for life with a moon?
No.
The perfect size to blot out the sun and the eclipse?
I do think we are a speck of dust in space. I think God built a massive, massive gallery to his might.
I just think maybe he built this space perfect the way it's meant to be.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here.
I do agree that. I'm just saying.
And that's why everything else wants to be here. That's why all these aliens are like, hey, we're from other place, but we're coming here to help you. It's almost like this place is the most important spot.
Our planet's hot and full of molten sulfur.
Well, I mean, you got to have everything in it, right? You got to have everything. Can't have good without the bad.
But yeah, sacred geometry. We talked about it recently that last year's one of the Nobel Prizes was for a scientist proving that reality is localized. And it's way above my head. It's a very unique thing. I highly suggest everybody look it up because I believe the guy. A lot of these stuff I don't believe as far as when you get into quantum physics and stuff like that, you need like 4 doctorates to even talk about it.
Is that like the thing, like a video game rendering? It only renders what?
So he shows you and we talk about it on our show. Joel's talked about it a bunch that, for example, we only see like 5% of the light spectrum as humans.
Right.
Other animals see much, much bigger parts of the spectrum. So when your cat's staring at the wall, it may actually be seeing something that you just, you're not privy to with how our biology is designed. So it basically shows that localized reality to the observer. It's an advancement of the observer effect, which we did an episode on. I highly suggest because it's a very fascinating thing where even stuff, I don't like Neil deGrasse Tyson, but even he was talking about how it's one of the great unsolved things of physics. Because everybody's done it. Everybody's done this experiment except for one lab and found the same result 400 something times in the last 100 years.
It's the one of the few things he can't just talk himself out of.
And it's interesting to hear somebody like that, a big naysayer of everything, a big downer, be like, we don't know. It's refreshing to just hear we don't know. But we know a lot of science is we know the result and we just kind of make up the middle. Like gravity, like we talked about a second ago. We know the force of gravity and we just kind of make up the middle bits.
And I'm wondering too, with sacred geometry, I always thought with you and I, like human beings, we have a certain flow of energy that always goes through us. And then every sort of living thing on Earth has that flow of energy through it. Even inanimate objects have energy flowing through it. And I wonder if sacred geometry just kind of complements those energy flows that we just can't see, that are invisible to us.
I think it's built into our biology. I really do. If you look at you ever seen the snail shells?
I'll just say it is. Sorry. Look at our fingers. That has those proportions built into our body. Like the Vitruvian Man represents that. The Da Vinci drawing represents sacred geometry in it.
You ever seen those 2 snail shells that screw together perfectly?
Yeah.
One's from the Atlantic, one's from the Pacific.
Ain't that nuts?
Because they grow inverted, but it's the same geometry. It's the same geometry for the shells for these unrelated snails.
Just the inverse of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully that's what we were supposed to talk about.
No, that's great. I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And it leads into this Bashar 5 laws of creation. So he's given Anka these 5 laws of creation to tell his followers. And number 1 is you exist. So that ties into cogito ergo sum, which means I think, therefore I am, which is from Rene Descartes. And he's frequently hailed as one of the most influential thinkers since Socrates, nicknamed the father of modern philosophy, was personally responsible for the discovery of analytic geometry and other mathematical concepts. So he was directly tied to geometry itself. And this goes right into the first law of creation from Bashar. is that I think, therefore I am, which is connected right back to sacred geometry. Number 2 is everything is here and now. You know, a lot of these vague principles, right? Oh, it can mean this, it can mean that. That's kind of what they do too. They give you an open playbook. Number 3, the one is all and the all are one. So that goes into that seemingly prevailing idea that's really hit hard again in the past 15 years, that we're one with the universe, that we're actually God. We're a piece of God. And I do believe that we're born with a divine spark, all of us, because we are born in the likeness of God. We know that from Genesis. So we all have that ability in our DNA. It's like you just said, Justin, it's in our DNA. The geometry's in our DNA. But we're not going to become God. We're not going to get sucked back up into this godhood, and we're all moving like these light beings. You know, the classic star seed, which we'll talk about star seeds here in a minute too, because that's another big one that's hot right now, as well as the idea that people are from Nephilim bloodlines, which I think people are, but I do think that people take on board these things to feel special. Oh, I'm from Nephilim bloodline. Oh, I'm a star seed. That's why I'm able to communicate with these things. And I'm not saying that you might not have a bloodline that has a proclivity to the occult or these beings, because I think that's for sure possible. But I think a lot of times people get so caught up in that part of it that they lose sight of everything else because, oh, I'm special. I'm more special than everybody else because I have a Nephilim bloodline, or I'm a star seed. And I think that that's a dangerous road because the entities can manipulate that. They can present themselves as angels of light. We know that Lucifer does. So they're not presenting themselves as evil initially. Sometimes they do. You know, when we're looking at reptilians or even greys, sometimes they do come off pretty cold and calculated and evil initially. But I'd say the majority of them, back to what you said early on in this episode, Jay, that they're presenting themselves as good. They're these beings of light that are here to help us. And number 4, what you put out is what you get back in. Well, that's true. I think that if you put out negativity, you're going to get negative things back. You put out positive things, you're going to get positive things back. So again, these laws aren't necessarily wrong completely, but they do twist things that we know as good things. And the last law is everything changes except the first 4 laws. So that's a very Gnostic
Oh my
viewpoint.
gosh.
Very Gnostic viewpoint that it's willy-nilly. Do whatever you want. And you'll be all right in the end if you're trying to ascend. As long as you're listening to these ascended masters, these Mahatmas, these secret chiefs, which we're going to talk about here in a second. That's exactly what it is. It's this, listen to us, we'll get you to where we are, and then you'll ascend and you'll become a god.
First off, those are so vague.
Yeah.
Very vague. But doesn't that just sound like, I forgot the word, like, not a medium, but the ghost shows where they'll talk to your dead relatives. That's all I could think of when he was talking about, like,
Was that John Edwards?
I'm getting somebody with a J name.
Right.
Oh, my Uncle Jack just died. Your Uncle Jack is calling from,
Right. Yeah.
I just, vague.
And like Joel said, I don't think a lot of these things are wrong or even.
Yeah.
That's where I think it's tricky. Yeah. It's so vague that you can make truth out of it. You can find truth in any of it and believe it, because I think people want to believe in something. And when you get an entity talking in your ear,
it makes you feel special. I mean, Joel brought that up. It's this, when they're talking to you, and like the guy, I know I picked on him a lot, that's talking to these things, but he may not really be bad. He may really believe what they're selling him.
Oh yeah.
And so even though in my opinion, he's probably doing bad things, he may not realize he's doing bad things. He may, he may genuinely feel like he's doing good things for people. But it's the devil knows the Bible the best, and warp scripture to get through what he wants.
Right.
And I think these things probably fall in a similar vein, like we've already been saying this whole thing, that the stuff that they're quite selling isn't quite bad, but it's just vague enough that you can interpret it into however you want to live your life, and that can lead you down some bad paths.
No, I completely agree. And this planet, this Essani, where they live, the meaning behind it, and this is, of course, what Bashar is telling the people, place of living light. And apparently there's over 300 billion of them that live on this planet, which is super crazy. But that's what he's telling them. And I just find it fascinating that everything rolls back into the light. This is the place you want to get to. You want to get to the light. You want to become a light being. And honestly, that's exactly what they're selling, that you're going to become us. And Bashar even says miracles are not the exception to the rule. They are the natural, true order of things. And I typically agree with that. I think that a lot of the strangeness and the weirdness that happened on in early civilizations and early man, I think that was partially due to that sacred geometry of our brains, probably both hemispheres working in tandem together, because they don't work in tandem anymore. They work separately. So early man may have been way more in tune with what we would consider miracles now. It might just be they were more in tune to the spiritual world. So this is what these beings are selling. They're trying to get us back to that, but they're also just slightly shifting you down the wrong way. But a slight shift down the wrong way, at the end of that road, you're way off from your mark where you should have been, because every little inch just keeps taking you further and further away. And I do believe that that's the mission for a lot of these beings. Yeah, some of them come off super aggressive, and we're going to definitely talk about the Greys today, but I do think that, to Jay's point earlier, that yes, that they are trying to present themselves as good things. And as a matter of fact, part of the vision, I don't know if you guys went to the website that Anka runs, but he talks about we strive to be a global leader in facilitating fair exchange, ensuring the profound teachings of Bashar are accessible to all. And that just leads right back into Alice Bailey and what I talked about before with the Lucius Trust, that it's all about globalism. What is it about this idea that, oh, we got to build this global community? Oh, we all got to be together. We need like one order for all. They're all teaching that, which is super weird if you want to go down the road of the classic NWO New World Order, but they all say it. Some of them actually say the words New World Order. We're trying to build a New World Order.
That used to just be the term for it until that it got toxic and people realized this ain't a good thing.
On.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, because it's kind of the exact opposite of a lot of the teachings in the Bible, right? Because it's putting the world. So you're a human is supposed to take care of, like, for us, your kids are first. You always take care of your kids first. It teaches that. And then it's your family. And then it's your community. And then it would be your country. And then it would be the world. This idea of the New World Order or the One World Order is flipping that.
Right. Yeah.
Putting the needs of the world before
yourself.
But that's not how that's not how we're supposed to live. We're any animal. We're not, we're special. But your kids should be everything. Maybe not your kids, but kids in general should be everything. And it's kind of, I don't know, to me, it always, anytime the New World Order gets brought up or One World Order, it seems so good on the surface until you really look into it.
Yeah. Everybody doing the same thing under the same rule, under the same everything.
It's great. I'm moving to Alaska.
Yeah. And before we jump into the rest of these alien, quote unquote, beings that we're going to talk about, the ones that are interacting with mankind now, I want to talk about beings that some of these occult orders were talking about and show the similarities before we jump back into it. And one of those is the secret chiefs. And in various occult movements, the secret chiefs are said to be transcendent cosmic authorities, a spiritual hierarchy responsible for the operation and moral calibre of the cosmos, or for overseeing the operations of an esoteric organization that manifests outwardly in the form of a magical order or lodge system. Some say that these beings are from an underground location such as Shambhala. So I thought that was interesting because we're definitely going to talk about how that a lot of these beings are attributed to not only interdimensional, but also underground, where a lot of these are seen. Now, Carl von Eckartshausen, he wrote a book called The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary, published in 1795, and he explained in some detail their character and motivations. This is the first time that the secret chiefs were talked about in book form. But Aleister Crowley also used it with his order of the AA, and he used it as the upper 3 grades. So if you got to the upper 3 grades, you would become one of these secret chiefs. Not only connect to these secret chiefs, which are these entities that are imbuing knowledge and all of that, but you would actually become one as well. And in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Samuel Mathers, and I've talked about him plenty of times on this show and his connection to Aleister Crowley, but he claimed that he had contacted these secret chiefs independently, and that confirmed his position as head of the Golden Dawn. So that's how he took over the Golden Dawn, was his connection to these entities. Well, they sound a lot like what these people are meeting today. It sounds a lot like the Sassani. It sounds a lot like some of these other entities that we're going to talk about. They're from a higher order, an ascended order. We're here to help you become one of us. They look very human-like. Some people say they are humans that have ascended, but they have all these extra powers. So I think it's fascinating, this connection between these high-level occultists that I've named, I'm going to name some more later, that are connected to these beings that seem and operate very much like what people are contacting now.
Yeah, burn them all.
I say I can't disagree with that. Do you think I don't know why it popped in my head, but the Stephen Greer CE5 modern stuff where they're contacting, or these entities or light beings, even there's even photos of them being
like that little cherub picture.
Like little rainbow ribbon looking things surrounding people. Do you think that has a connection with all this stuff too? Because a lot of it seems very similar.
Absolutely.
He's got a picture of a gray, floating like a gaseous gray. And he says when they were doing this,
What's
demons.
one of the craziest pictures I've seen out of the CE5 Stephen Greer stuff, and I'll show it up here on YouTube and Rumble for everyone as I'm talking, but it looks like an exact replica of Lamb that Aleister Crowley met with. And this thing's head is monstrous, but you can see like the veins in its head. It's real detailed. It's not like some of the more etheric photos that come out of the Stephen Greer stuff where you can see the gray face, but it's more wispy. This thing looks like it's coming out of the shadows and it's just staring, and it looks very real and physical. And I think that's one of the ones that really blew my mind. And the first time I saw that photo was when we were shooting the Melonhead documentary, Justin, and one of the guys that you got me in contact with, which I won't tell his story here because I want people to watch the documentary and hear his story, but he showed me a picture of this particular lamb-like entity from Stephen Greer's CE5. And it looks, almost identical, Justin, to the drawing that Crowley drew of this being. So it wasn't the typical grays that we'll see in the CE5 sessions. This thing was, man, it looked like its head just came out of the shadows and was just staring. It's wild.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. If anybody don't know me, I'll burn everything down. I've threatened ghosts and demons before.
With fire.
I'll kill us all.
Yep.
I said that to a house one time.
I was there.
Mm-hmm. It didn't mess with me until I was leaving.
All right, yeah, it waited.
He won't
Side
burn it
note,
when he's walking out the door.
when we did that episode, guys, with TJ, and you remember I had that incident that happened to me when you guys got there that night with that looming thing standing over my bed or sitting on my bed that pinned me down. Well, about a month and a half later, I had a similar incident here at the house, but I wasn't in the real world. I was in some sort of dreamscape, and it was the same thing. I knew it because I could feel it, and it was just a massive black mass, and it grabbed me, and it was trying to pull me into some portal-looking thing or gateway or whatever. And the same thing happened. I just said, in the name of Jesus, let me go. And it's like it let go and something yanked it away again. So I bring that up in saying that those types of interactions seem oddly similar to a lot of the things that happen, specifically with the Greys, but a lot of these quote unquote extraterrestrials that abduct people. It's very similar to demonic attacks or negative entities that are attacking people. It just comes off the same way, Justin. I don't see how people can't put that correlation together sometimes.
I mean, I've hinted, I guess, very poorly about it already this episode. But no, there's a ton of the demonic angles with a lot of these especially these type of entities with abduction phenomena, in home invasion phenomena. Like personally, we've had several people locally, by that I mean in the state of Ohio, about that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And the one man was actually from your neck of the woods, Joel. Had everything from grays, not deer, men in black in his house. Like, remember he was frozen and they walked over his body when he was on the floor. And then when he was being held down by the tall grays, he spoke out to the name of Jesus and they just recoiled and he kept doing it. And then he passed out and his wife came in hours later. And that was, I believe he hasn't updated us in a long time, but that was his last incident he had, casting them out. And he same kind of like you, these things were like being pulled away from him. Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, just test it. If you're wondering if an entity's good or bad, just like hand it across.
Yeah.
Talk about Jesus.
See how it goes.
Yeah, if it catches on fire, it's probably not the thing you should be talking to.
Yeah, it's like, is Jesus real or is that just a magic word that turns things to fire?
Both.
Oh.
It's both.
I like what you said, Justin, about testing them. And there's a verse in the Bible that says those exact words. 1 John 4 says, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see where they are from." And you should. And I think that's important because throughout time, these entities have presented themselves a myriad of different ways, and sometimes multiple ways at the same time. And I think that's exactly what they're doing now. This is just more for the modern man. But I do agree with you, Justin, that in this day and age, people are seeking out spirituality more than ever. And the atheist rational mind has gone to the wayside a lot. You still have some of those old boomers like rolling around. And yeah, you got some younger folks that follow that. But I'd say the majority, a high majority of people believe in some sort of spirituality. They know that we're created to be spiritual beings and they're seeking it out. But the problem with Christianity is that there's so many negative aspects to it because there's people that are using it improperly, that are teaching people the wrong way, that are weaponizing it. So then people don't want to be a part of it because they see all the negative coming out of it. And I think that's just the entities working on both ends of it. Let's keep them out by showing them that it's negative, but then let's also show them this great way on this other end, but it's also negative.
Yeah, I 100% agree. There's just, there's a lot of, I guess, bad out there. I mean, you can think of the one, like, I'm all for witnessing to people and everything like that. And you should. Penn from Penn and Teller, he's a staunch atheist and he talks about this a lot, that if he has a Christian friend and they're not witnessing to him, it hurts his feelings basically. Because if you truly believe in hell heaven and hell, and you're not telling me that, you think very little of me as a person. And he talks to atheists about that too, that, just because you don't believe, if they truly believe that, they think that, they're trying to save you. So you should take it as that,
Right.
It's interesting to hear a very renowned atheist kind of bring that up. What else? I had another thing. Oh, with science, because I think there's this big disconnect with science and atheism. As a man that worked in many fields of biology, and I didn't work with like the federal branches, but I was contracted with federal branches. I was not an employee of them, if that makes sense to everybody at home. When you get up to high-level scientists, I kid you not, it's probably 50-50 with Christians and atheists. And the thing is, a lot of the Christians are just, they in these high levels of science, just live their lives. They don't pick fights about it. They'll talk about it if you ask them. It's the atheist scientists that'll scream the loudest. And that's just from my personal experience in that very narrow field of work. But I always stick up for scientists in general, because I feel like there's an overgeneralization of the very few scientists that are public figures.
Well, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah, the public figure scientists generally are not the best people.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about him already, that Neil deGrasse Tyson. I don't like him. I can't stand him when he talks. He's very negative about everything, like talking about Star Wars and, shooting that stuff down, or Jurassic Park. Like, nobody cares.
Right, it's a movie.
We're not here for the scientific aspects of Star Wars.
Hey, but if he can prove a point.
Or Bill Nye. And I hate Bill Nye for several reasons. That
not a scientist.
There's that, but he also, I feel like when you're that big of a public figure to a whole generation, you are held to a different standard.
Mm-hmm.
And then he came out and started like his first big thing back was he's cussing at all of us.
Right, yeah.
And just like, well, Steve from Blue's Clues, when he came back, he apologized. I had to go to college. It was, I don't know.
Different.
As far as generational, I grew up with Bill Nye and I grew up with that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel bad for some of the scientists that are Christians they don't have to be Christian, but these scientists that are really open-minded in working on things, and they get lumped in with those guys.
Bill Nye. Yeah.
It's not like that. It's not like that.
Mm-mm.
I don't know where else I was going with that. I just feel bad for him, because I worked with a lot of those guys. I worked with plenty of really amazing scientists that are extremely open-minded.
Yeah, it just muddies the water for people that really seek answers or, seek truth. And you got people like Bill Nye that they throw in your face, on TV, telling you what is and what isn't. And you're supposed to believe him because when you were a kid, he had a science show that taught kids science. So he's got to be a genuine, real person and not reading off a script of what they tell him to.
It just, with all this stuff.
It's ridiculous.
Cryptids of the Corn is... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Joel.
I read something recently where that most the tippy top of scientists believe that there is a God, that there's an order to things. Now, some of them will regurgitate what they're told to say and come off as atheists because they're trying to throw people off the path. Because when you introduce God into the equation, well, then evolution takes a different turn at that point. No matter how you think about evolution as a whole, it definitely takes a different trajectory if something created it at all. So then you have to recalibrate even how that even works.
Now with that, I won't go into it because I know we're already extremely off topic. If anybody listens to Cryptic Corners podcast, this is what happens. You start with something and you end up somewhere else. But no, with evolution, because we're actually preparing, it's probably going to be a season finale someday because just how big the script is getting for it. The theory of evolution, there's actually 6 definitions, and it's this big muddy mess. The theory of evolution is not the adaptation of species over time. And that is, if you say you do not believe in evolution right now, especially in the science field, that is what people assume, that you do not believe species adapt to their environment over time. I 100% believe that. I think God gave all of the creation the ability, if the environment changes, God gave his creation to follow that change. there's many other, like, science can kind of write away everything if you let them have their one miracle. I think Joe Rogan that's one of his lines, is that science can write down everything, explain everything, make up everything, as long as you allow them their one miracle,
which is Big Bang.
The Big Bang.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm sure when God said, "Let there be light," there was a pretty big bang when that happened. Anyways,
it's like when we're born or when we're conceived. When conception happens, and there's a
flash of light.
There's a big bang.
You know that?
Yeah, that's what I said it.
Okay, I'm just saying that you've seen the picture, the video. It's crazy to me that there's actually light production, and no biologist has ever been able to explain that.
Well, it's zinc.
Zinc. It's just zinc.
That's what they say.
No, evolution is just this big muddy mess that I feel bad for people, the average person, because they do not understand what that word means. And for anybody that maybe has a better understanding, they get belittled.
Yeah.
Because the average kid, in high school, you were taught about evolution for about 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that this theory of evolution is that species adapt and change their environment over time. And that is about the smallest subset of the theory of evolution. And it's still a theory. It'll always be a theory. There's been labs, thousands of labs trying to recreate. So the primordial soup experiment, and then even after that, having amino acid soup. So nobody's ever made an amino acid from a non-amino acid, which is it's in the building blocks of like DNA and stuff like that.
Right.
So it's the building blocks of the building blocks.
Mm-hmm.
So they skipped that stage, and they still haven't got it jumbled enough.
You're looking too much into it.
Yeah. You shouldn't look.
No.
It makes sense if you don't look at it.
No, you just got to believe everything they teach you in school.
Yeah, if you do that, it makes perfect sense.
Once you graduate with your GED from public schooling, you are set for life. You know everything.
Sorry, we got off topic. We're bad.
No, that's great because I think that's important. And I'm looking forward to that when you guys break down evolution, because I think there's so many nuances to it that people don't think about. They just think about evolution bad, creation good, or vice versa, right? That's how people think. They don't understand how the machinations of it actually works when we're talking about adaptation, which I completely am on board with you when it comes to that. Especially, I think the world's been around for billions of years, and I know we can give or take millions or whatever, billions, but I do think it's been around for a long time, and I think things have adapted over time as well. But also, I think these entities probably adapted to this Earth too, and adapted themselves to how we adapted. They just changed into what worked at the time. And I think throughout time they've done that. And I think this is where they've gotten to now, where they've adapted to this modern mindset of technology. They've probably helped us with some of this technology too, especially if you want to look at Roswell and some of these other big incidences where, we supposedly got a hold of some craft and got in contact with some of these beings. But I think it ties right back into what would be talked about in Theosophy in the New Age, the Great White Brotherhood, which are also called the Masters of Ancient Wisdom, the Ascended Masters of the Church Invisible, or simply the Hierarchy, which I find all these words super fascinating when we're talking about beings that are helping us get to the light. And these Ascended Masters, known as Mahatmas, are believed in several theosophical and related spiritual traditions to be spiritually enlightened beings, check this out now, who in past incarnations were ordinary humans. So this is who these occultists like Helena Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons, and we can go down the line of all these guys, Samuel Mathers, they were connecting with these entities who said that in a past life, they were ordinary humans. Well, what does that sound like? What does that sound like right now? What are these entities, these aliens, telling people? What is this Bashar saying? He's saying that they're from the future. They're humans from the future, and they're coming back to help us. It's the same exact thing that these Mahatmas, these ascended masters, these secret chiefs were telling these occultists. However, these occultists were a little more privy to what these beings actually were. I don't know if they knew exactly what they were, but they were probably a little bit closer to the mark than what a lot of these people who are super wrapped up in New Age practices that are meditating to connect to these beings And I think that they're the same thing. And I think if we start looking at it through the lens of the esoteric and secret societies in the occult, we get a little bit closer to what these beings actually are. And I thought that parallel was crazy. I don't know what you guys think about that, but this was being talked about 100 years ago, that these were people from the future that has evolved and is now telling us who they are.
I agree that, like you said, that these things are adapting with the times. I've been a big believer of that forever, that it's just the new mask. By that, I mean, the last 150 years.
Yeah.
But not, I mean, they've had this mask forever. If you look at Aboriginal paintings, there's grays in there.
Well, they still talk about them.
Yeah. But it just I think it's the modern day favorite mask. I guess I'll put it like that.
Mhm.
It's definitely the one, because it's what I talk about, I guess, and I don't know how Jay feels, but we brought it up a couple times that why it's the same reason you don't see giant, grandiose miracles anymore. Christianity is a faith-based religion. So what's faith mean? You are believing it without substantial proof, I guess. You have to make the decision to follow. If God comes down and just talks to you,
Mm-hmm.
Then it's not faith-based. You just seen God.
Right.
So why don't you see miracles happen every day? I've had miracles happen to me. Everybody in this room has had miracles happen to them. I'm talking about, the giant flaming swords over the sky, and because we live in the age of cameras, we live in the age of, the internet transmissions and live streaming.
Yeah, we're all like one phone call away from each other.
Yeah, so I think demons had to do the same thing, where if you show up as a demon, that proves the other side exists. It's the same coin. So you still want to do your work in the world, but you can't look like that anymore. So what do? You put on this scientific mask. You're a scientist from the future. You're us, or you're an alien from an extra planet, all that stuff.
Anything but the truth.
Anything but the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what do you think?
I mean, I agree with that. For the most part.
Yeah, it don't matter. I don't care.
Yeah, you can just over time, going back even to old paintings where you see like where grays will appear and things like that. It just seems like this idea or these beings have been around for just man's entire existence. It feels like always trying to influence us, always trying to get in your ear. And I think that maybe that's the important part, is just manipulating, who we are so we can't navigate it ourselves. They're constantly manipulating us, whether, under the guise of being good. But I don't think at the end of the day, like we discussed, I don't think at the end of the day, the end goal is not a good one.
Yeah.
And they're just always in your ear. And it's just not a good thing. I think it's important for us to recognize those patterns that keep repeating over and over in history, and being able to recognize it and just standing up for yourself, or going by your own judgment and not being influenced by these things or people that are repeating what these things are saying. I don't know.
That was great. Thank you, Jay. That was really good. And not being that funny either. It's true. And I think as we move towards some of these other ones, like the Arcturians, if you look up what they look like, they're in the same pantheon of the light beings, but they're like a blue version of the grays. They have the big eyes, the big head, human-like qualities, but they have blue skin. And you're going to see these variations. And they, again, all look like us, or a version of themselves. They're not any kind of massive difference between them. And that's one of the biggest red flags I have right now, is why that they all look the same. And before we go down the road of Arcturians and some of these other ones, I want to ask you, Justin, what are your thoughts as a biologist on that? I know you and I have talked off air about it some, but I really want you to present this to the people listening, why that doesn't make sense from a scientific point of view, that all of these different alien races all look like us.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that, because we've done it a little bit on our show, but I don't think I've ever really
Explain why.
Explain it, because the easiest way to explain it is on this planet, every living organism is a part of what's called a biosphere. It's the tree of life. So the tree of life, whatever your religious beliefs or non-religious beliefs are, we all share DNA. We share building blocks. Whether you believe in a creator or not, it's the same thing. From a starfish to us to anything. So our biosphere inside of that means flatworms and starfish and us all share DNA, and we look drastically different. So when we talk about sentientship, just for example, fingers, right? So we think fingers are very, very important for everyday human activities. They're not necessary. So if you just look at manipulating materials, an elephant is a very intelligent animal. How do they manipulate materials? They have a trunk. They actually have more muscles in their trunk than we have in our entire body. They can pick up anything from a sewing needle to an 800-pound log with their trunk. So everything from fine motor control to just mass muscle. You look at octopi. They have suction cups that self-rotate. They have, high definition tentacle, like with feeling and all this stuff. So that's in our own tree of life, how to manipulate materials. So the old thought was that it's called convergent evolution, to where that two species that do the same niche end up looking the same. A big example would be sharks and dolphins. They have fundamental differences, but roughly, if you just look at the body shape and how they move through the environment, it's very, very similar. But those animals are also distantly related to each other. But if you look at what it takes to be sentient and tool use, and look at the three species I gave, there's primates and there's us, they have the opposable thumbs and hands and fingers. When you look at but octopi have tentacles that look nothing, we call them armed, but they're alien to us. They very are. And then elephants, these massive animals that are hyper intelligent that have one central, grasper, but they can do fine motor control with it and, muscular feats with it. So just in those three animals, none of those look like us, but we have similar body. We have eyes. We all, an alien is from a true alien would be from a different biosphere. So that could mean silicone-based life forms. So a lot of scientists believe that we're carbon-based life forms for everybody at home. That just means the very, very basic building blocks, the element that we're going to build around is carbon. It's very abundant here on the planet. It makes sense. Silicone, though, looks like it's a lot heavier, but it looks like it would fit that same need. But organisms, we theorize it would come from a silicon-based tree of life, may have either rocky or crystalline appearances, may have, they live millennia for our year. They'd be probably like if you went to another planet with silicon-based life forms, you may not even be able to recognize these things are alive because they are so alien to you. And that is the next closest group to us from the periodic table. Even other carbon-based life form, like we have ironclad snails that literally don't have a stomach. They suck in hydrothermal acid, and they have bacteria in their throat that breaks it down to food, and they put iron into their skin. So that's another animal that's here. So I guess the short answer is, if a true alien, by definition, is a completely different biosphere, a completely different planet with completely different evolutionary keys, they should absolutely look nothing like us, even if they're carbon-based. If you look at our simple family tree, carbon-based life forms here have taken every shape imaginable. Convergent evolution is the rarity, not the norm. Because there's plenty of animals that do the same job that do not look anything like each other. Especially if you look at Earth's history, like the fossil record and some of these really what seem to be very strange designs, but make perfect sense for these animals. So having fingers, knuckles, elbows, the same digits, or maybe some of these greys have 4 digits, but a lot of them have 5. Big eyes, nostrils, a mouth in the same location. Those are called Hox genes. So that means we just talked about this, that for our localized group, it's the body plan. Hox genes don't mutate, they don't change. It's the rough shape. So if you look at a lizard versus a person, the rough shape is the exact same. The arms, the legs, the head, the eyes, all that stuff. Very different body plans after that. But that rough, design. So they should look nothing like us. Nothing absolutely like us. I don't think we've ever been really visited by aliens, as in the true definition of extraterrestrial, another planet aliens. Because these guys all look like us. You know, you may say, well, Grey doesn't look anything really like us. But when you really break it down, it looks a heck of a lot more like us than a starfish does.
Oh, yeah.
And technically, we're related to that starfish. The only time I think we may have been visited by real aliens, and I've shared the story a couple times just because it's funny to me, is I think it was out west somewhere. This guy was out hiking and seen a ship land on a hill by a lake, and he walked over to it, and he basically described it as a giant flying dumpster. It's kind of the shape of it. It looked like a cargo ship. There's this big old freighter, and there's entities out there, and they're giant bearded crabs. And they're just going and getting water and going back to the ship. And he walks up to him, and he starts talking to him, and they like don't want anything to do with him. Leave us alone. You're on a backwater planet. We just need water. We're leaving. And then they left. That may have been, it's called carcinization, which is crabs have, loose term, crabs have evolved about 11 times throughout Earth's history. Of crustaceans, they're still all crustaceans, but there's other things like crab spiders that just happen. That's a good body shape. It's a good body plan. So that's just my little thing that I was like, maybe that one was real. Because they absolutely wanted nothing to do with the guy. And they look like giant crabs.
Yeah, this fits.
But no, aliens shouldn't look anything like us. We should be running into giant slime puddles. We should be running into cephalopod-like organisms. And that's just the ones you should have trouble recognizing them as alive in our definitions. I don't like NASA as an organization, but they talk about this when they start running into other extraterrestrial life on planets, or what to look for. Is that they have to train these people, like watching the rover photos, that life will not look like it is here. You're not going to see a scorpion running across the Mars desert. That one, if you believe the photos or whatever, we all have mixed opinions. That one photo of that on the Mars rover, there was like little white silica crystals on a rock that wasn't there the previous pass and it was gone. That could have been a silicon-based life form that just happens, it moves that slow. Or the geode-looking thing it ran over and cracked. That could be basically like a puffball mushroom for them.
Yeah.
But it looks like a rock.
Right.
Because it's maybe silicon-based. They basically would be these giant rocky things. Or if they have ammonia for blood, they'd be very different. But they could survive on like freezing temperatures.
Like antifreeze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so here's my 15-minute spiel about why aliens should not look like people. And some of these ones we're going to talk about are even a step further past Greys for looking like us.
I think maybe as well is why we've gotten such a big push for these beings recently through the government and a lot of the people who are having these sightings, that they're either from underground or they're interdimensional. Maybe that's their new evolution with the times. Maybe that's how they can explain it. Oh, no, we've been here all along. That's why we look like you guys. Or we're from the future, or the future versions of you, which has been really hot here the past 5-10 years. And I think that's the shift, because you brought it up that throughout time, they're just evolving with the times and how that they can trick people. So I think maybe that's their new format. But I do think that they are gravitating more and more and more to this spiritual being aspect. And they're not outright coming out saying they're angels. Some of them are. But for the most part, this is their cover. We're interdimensional. We're from this other dimension. We're talking about the Sassani earlier. They can move through 5 dimensions, is what they're said to be able to do. Their planet is actually resides in the 5th dimension, is what they talk about. And even these ones I just brought up, the Arcturians, they are from the Arcturus star, which is actually a legit star. It's the brightest star in the northern constellation of Bootes, with an apparent visual magnitude of negative 0.05. It is the 4th brightest star in the night sky and the brightest in the northern celestial hemisphere. So it's a legit star. They say they're from this star, which I find fascinating, that these beings are saying they're living on stars. So obviously they have to be some sort of etheric light beings, even though they're presenting themselves a lot of times in very physical ways. Now, the ideas of them are based on, get this, the psychic readings of Dolores Cannon, and she's an American hypnotherapist, and she's also an American author and publisher. She was the leader of the New Age movement and promoter of fringe theories relating to aliens and alternative realities. She died in 2014, but right around that real big push for the New Age movement, she was a big part of that. And also Edgar Casey, not Gacy, so people get that right, but it's Edgar Casey, and he was an American clairvoyant who claimed to diagnose diseases and recommend treatments for ailments while asleep. Now, he started out as a devout Christian. A lot of these guys do. And then they meet these beings and then they change their viewpoint. This is very similar to what's going on right now, in my opinion, with the Chris Bledsoe stuff, with him meeting this lady with these grays, and she calls herself Hathor, and she's telling him that she's the Holy Spirit. So now we've got these beings claiming that they are literally God from the Bible. But Edgar Casey and Dolores Cannon, two monstrous psychics at the height of the New Age movement when it started, come out and start talking about these Arcturians. They have these connections with these beings. And she was the one that brought the whole star seeds idea to the forefront, the idea that humans are reincarnations of beings from other galaxies. So this is what a lot of times these beings say too. They are us. They're just reincarnation versions of us. They're just the etheric part. Sometimes they're looking for host bodies. That kind of makes me think about Nephilim spirits, if we want to go down that road, but it all ties together. And again, with this New Age movement, these psychics, these people who are using occulted knowledges to contact these beings, or if they're just using these knowledges to advance themselves and they end up connecting to these beings, it happens again. This is how we find out about these Arcturians, because of this idea that we can become like them. And as we're using these ascended practices, we end up connecting to them. As a matter of fact, there's a book called The Keys of Enoch that was written by J.J. Hurtak, and he's actually a scientist and futurist. And this guy was also an archaeologist. He's a lot. This guy is really, really intelligent. He's got 2 PhDs, but he writes about the Arcturians and these brotherhoods of light in this book he wrote called The Keys of Enoch. And his whole plan was to show people how that science and religion need not be mutually exclusive. So back to what you said, Justin, a lot of these scientists believe in something spiritual. And it might not be the Christian worldview, but they believe in something's going on. And here's a guy who is a major accredited scientist who in his book, The Keys of Enoch, he talks about the Arcturians. He talks about these brotherhoods of light. And I thought it was funny. He brings up the Arcturians and then says brotherhoods of light. Well, that ties right back into what I was just talking about with the secret chiefs and the Mahatmas and the White Brotherhood. It's all the same verbiage. If you ever notice, they're always sliding in the same stuff. They might be changing with the times, Justin, but they find a way. They use the same lingo they were using 5,000 years ago, again here, just in a different format.
Same book, different cover.
Absolutely.
Just like, I just seen a video, I think just last night, about what is this, the town of like Walhalla in, I think, North Carolina or something, or South Carolina. But they formed that town as a German town that was formed, but the basis of it was just an offshoot of just Freemasonry. It was like this German lodge, but basically it had all the same rules and all the same structure, but just different verbiage. It's just the same thing, but just, the different label on it. But just basic building structures. That's why I think a lot of these different either alien entities, all the messages they convey, it's always the same kind of idea, just a different verbiage or different, their message, their way of presenting it, I guess, is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this will lead us right into the Nordics or Pleiadians. And these are extraterrestrial beings and life forms visiting Earth, and they're also called the Tall Whites. And they are a purported humanoid race hailing from the Pleiades star cluster, also known as Pleiadians, as they reportedly share superficial similarities with German or Scandinavian humans. Now, alleged contactees describe Nordics as being somewhat taller than the average human, which I am already going down this Nephilim route with that, especially with a lot of the interactions that we're going to talk about here in a second. They stand roughly 6 to 7 feet tall in height, and they show stereotypically European or white features, such as long, straight blonde hair, blue eyes, and fair skin. However, it is said that depending on who they're talking to throughout history, they actually change to whoever they're talking to. So if they're in South America talking to someone who's of a darker skin, they come off that way. They will morph to whoever that they're in contact with. And so the whole idea of the Nordics or Pleiadians being just tall whites isn't necessarily true. This whole Aryan idea, actually, that they've changed depending on where they're at. And when they were first brought up was in the 1950s by George Adamski, and he wrote several papers about his alleged contact with these beings. Now, obviously, people came out and said that he was lying, but he said he met with these friendly Nordic alien space brothers and claims to have taken flights with them to the moon and other planets. And around the same time, several other people started coming out saying that they also had contact with these Nordics or tall whites. But I don't think that just because Adamski was the first one to use that verbiage, that it was the first time that these Pleiadians or tall whites actually showed up. And I can tell you about one in particular incident that Justin and I beef about a lot is Admiral Byrd and his whole situation when he went to the North Pole. Now, I've had a lot of time to think about this, Justin, and you know I've gone back and forth about this for probably the better part of 3 years on was he telling the truth? Was he lying? I honestly believe that he was telling the truth according to what he saw. So I want to preface that. I don't think that necessarily he might have even been in the North Pole. He might have thought he was in the North Pole. He might have been drawn by these ships to go to what he thought was inner Earth. It could have actually been inner Earth, but it might have even been around the North Pole. We don't really know all of that because his plane was having failure and these ships came, pulled up next to him with some sort of tractor beam or whatever, draws him into the Earth. Now, here's the part where I really think that he was telling the truth because of everything I just talked about earlier with a lot of the verbiage, the Mahatmas, the Ascended Masters, these secret chiefs, these beings who are trying to help us progress. And this is exactly the story that happens when they bring him down there. One of the first things that they say out of their mouth when these Nordics walk up to him, from all intents and purposes, they're Nordics because they're tall, they have blonde hair. And as a matter of fact, on the ships, Justin, there were swastikas.
Yeah.
Which I want to explain to people that the modern mind has attributed the swastika to a specific group of people who did some very bad things. The swastika's been around for centuries. That actual symbology has been around in many cultures before that. And it's a very occulted symbol, and it has to do more with what you're using that symbol to represent as opposed to what Hitler was using it for. Now, Hitler was also a study of the occult arts, so he did use that symbol also for that. But just so people understand that this is not a Adolf only thing.
Now, I have a Boy Scout manual from 1919 that has a big swastika on the side. because it was, if anybody who's not familiar, until the 1920s, it was the Boy Scout symbol in here in North America. Just like Joel just said, it was not synonymous with the Hitler's group until the 1930s and 40s.
Yeah, right. The Boy Scouts just knew that it was coming up.
But, I mean, it's on Hindu temples, right? They're like 2,000 years old.
But Jainism, it's in Jainism. It's like their main symbol.
Yeah, swastikas are everywhere. It's easy shape to draw.
Well, and you have to think that it started back as early as the earliest known language that we know about, the Sanskrit language. And it actually means well-being. It means good. So when you see the symbol, that's actually what it means. So when Byrd sees us on the side of these planes, that's what they mean by it. So again, it was bogarted and used as a negative thing, but it never was meant for that. However, I think it goes back into, it was probably always kind of a negative thing, especially when we're looking at occulted symbols and what these beings are trying to use it for. They're attributing it to light, even though it has a deeper meaning that's not.
100%. Yeah, I don't know. My opinion changes on everything all the time with Admiral Byrd.
Here's the thing that's going to help change your mind. So when the host comes up to Admiral Byrd, the first thing that he says is, "Have no fear, Admiral." It also reminds me, it's very similar to what angels say when they meet people.
Be not afraid.
Be not afraid. Have no fear. Have no fear, Admiral. You have an audience with what? The master. So he goes to meet this master. And the master says, "You are in the domain of the Ariani, the inner world of the earth. We shall not long delay your mission, and you will be safely escorted back to the surface for a distance beyond. But now, Admiral, I shall tell you why you've been summoned here. Our interest rightly begins just after your race exploded the first atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan. It was at that alarming time we sent our flying machines, they call them the Flugerads, to your surface world to investigate what your race had done. And there's been many reports around those times with atomic bombs and even back to World War II and all these different wars that have happened. UFOs have popped up many times during wars. Even centuries ago, you'll see it in paintings. We know that many paintings in the Renaissance had UFOs in weird places of the paintings as well. So he's saying that these Flugerads went to the surface world, watched it, and the master says, "You see, we have never interfered before in your race's wars and barbarity, but now we must. For you have learned to tamper with a certain power that is not for man, namely that of atomic energy. Our emissaries have already delivered messages to the powers of your world, yet they do not heed. Now you've been chosen to be witness here that our world does exist. You see, our culture and science is many thousands of years beyond your race, Admiral. Of course, they're so much more advanced. They have so much to help us with." And obviously, Admiral Byrd starts asking, what does this have to do with me? And the master says, in 1945 and afterward, we tried to contact a race. Well, we know in the mid-1940s what was going on. Tons of UFO and alien activity was going on around that time. But our efforts were met with hostility, and our Flugerads were fired upon. Yes, even pursued with malice and animosity by your fighter planes. So now I say to you, my son, there is a great storm gathering in your world, a black fury that will not spin itself for many years. There will be no answer in your arms. There will be no safety in your science. It may rage on until every flower of your culture is trampled and all human things are leveled in vast chaos. Your recent war was only a prelude of what is yet to come for your race. We here see it more clearly with each hour. Do you say that I'm mistaken? So at this point, he sends Admiral Byrd back on his way and tells him to go talk to his people, which according to the story, he did. He went back and talked to the President of the United States. And some people even tie this into the Vril, which I've talked about the Vril on this show on one of my cloning episodes. And the Vril are also a very similar type of entity. Aryan, tall, blonde hair, blue-green eyes. And funny enough, the Vril Society spawned out around the same time as the Nazi Party. So this all was connected. And here we are with Admiral Byrd going there, seeing these swastikas on the side of these UFOs and the same type of beings. So I think that when the term Nordics popped up, the term Pleiadians started popping up, this is what they were. They had already been showcasing themselves. It's just that they had a more modern term to it now. And these are probably the strangest ones to me, Justin. I'm going to ask what you and Jay think about them. They look almost just like us. The only difference is they have access to, in the Vril lore, they have access to this fluid called the Vrilia that gives them all this power. And apparently the Vril live underground, just like the master that Admiral Byrd talks to. And they know at some point that their race is going to become so many that they're going to have to come to the surface world and take over, is basically the story of the Vril. But I find it fascinating, Justin. I want to know what you guys think about it. They look almost just like us. They don't look like the Greys or a Grey hybrid, kind of like we talked about the Sassani or the Arcturians and some of these other ones that have these big heads, big eyes. No, they look just like us, just taller, and they have powers.
What do you think?
Well, I think there's a reason they probably look like us, I would imagine. I always harken back to the great Daryl Sims, alien hunter. And when he described, taking, or just describing the different, I guess, quote unquote, aliens around the world, and the different ones, like these ones that look similar to us, he speculates that's because we may be a hybrid. They may be part of us. They may have our DNA.
Oh,
and that's why they look so similar to us. Like you mentioned earlier about all the, if aliens were from different planets, they would look vastly different.
yeah.
So the fact that they look so near or close to what we are as humans and very recognizable, it just makes me believe that I think Daryl is correct when it comes to them looking like this. It's because they have our DNA in them. They're somehow tied to us for one way or another.
Now with the Vril, all I can ever think of is the Vril women, right? That they use to talk to entities with the big long ponytails because they connected to the Earth to talk to quote unquote space things. No, I really don't know, because they, like Joel just said, that they are pretty much indistinguishable from people. And there's a couple of these races that are other ones that are pretty much just
like that.
Just people. I mean, the Nordics are pretty much just people, but like Joel said, they're average. They'd be big people.
Right.
But they're averagely that big. With, I think, maybe a tiny, a little feature here, a little feature there that put them off a little different. But maybe you just seen a Nordic, you'd be like, that's a big German dude. But the Vril, I really don't know. I mean, whether it's things masking as just people that are just not even caring anymore, or if the Vril with the Vrilia, maybe that they are humans that tapped into some kind of power source. There's a movie about it, actually. It's, oh gosh, what is it called? Like, I can't even remember the name of it, but it's got Hitler in the Hollow Earth riding dinosaurs with the Vrilia.
Oh,
and
gosh.
And they were aliens, and humans had wiped themselves out. This is like literally like Joel was just talking about, the war that ended all wars. The last little bit of humanity was living on the moon. And there's like, a couple hundred people. Like, it's like they're going to die from decompression any day. It's like a really rough base. And then Hitler's brother had got a hold of them so they could steal the ship that Hitler had. And like Sarah Palin was in it too, as one of these things. It's a great movie. I can't think of the name of it, but I highly suggest everybody watch it. Like, Hitler's riding a T-Rex around.
Right. And I do wonder too, if they had all this knowledge and they knew who Admiral Byrd was, they knew him by his name, his occupation, all that information, yet they couldn't warn people or stop people from dropping 2 nuclear bombs that supposedly affected everything. Not saying that they can't interfere.
No. But
they knew that was going to happen. It wasn't no surprise to them. No, you can't convince me that they were shocked by that.
Like Joel said a minute ago, that these guys act all like we're thousands of years ahead of you.
Right.
Right. And then stop us. If you're that worried, about nukes,
right,
then just don't let them go off.
Right.
If you're thousands of years ahead of us, we built a nuke in essentially a basement.
Technology we're not supposed to
in
have.
the 1930s and early 40s. I mean, if mean, that movie, oh gosh, I just forgot it, about how they made the nukes. Just came out like last year or the year before.
I'm not sure. Oh, Oppenheimer.
I mean, that's not super accurate, but I mean, it's accurate enough for a docudrama. They basically just cobbled together that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying that you can't just, you got teleporters, you got tractor beams, just throw it into orbit.
Right. Yeah.
Just throw it, if you're that advanced
or that powerful.
Yeah. You could, and you're worried about nukes, then, and we've talked to your leaders and they've done nothing, then kill them.
Right.
If you're that powerful, show up in the sky and be like, hey guys, we tried to talk to your leaders. They weren't receptive. So now we're just showing you guys on the jumbo screen that we live in the Earth. We don't want to interfere with you, but stop using nukes.
Right.
I don't know.
Or maybe perhaps they want to influence you without directly doing it, because then the Earth might get flooded.
I mean, that's what I'm saying, that if they were real, as far as what they projected themselves to be, there would be like, yeah, we look like you. We're distantly related. I don't know what that noise was. I think the government's coming to get us. No, that was probably a little Nephilim trying to break in.
Probably.
No, I don't. I mean, the more they look like us, the more I don't trust them. But the underground society, like you said, you brought up Daryl, like they talk about the ant people out west that look just like Greys. I mean, they call them ants just because their eyes. Right. And they live underground in these massive systems. I mean, Dulce Base, or however you say it, has massive hives of Greys, apparently. They just live underground. I don't know. The more they look like us, the more I do not trust them. Right, and the Vril are even more so, just with their Hitler connection and all that, and the Vrilia women and this mysterious substance. Like, I mean, from the Glock and everything like that, supposedly had a liquid that was a superpower, whether it was flying or teleporting or whatever. Was that given to this group from the Vril after the connection? Or, I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard telling.
It's weird.
The chicken or the egg? What came first?
And I think we have to tie, when we're talking about this mysterious substance, you got to go down an alchemical road then when you start talking about the Philosopher's Stone, which most people don't think was an actual stone. It was some sort of substance. We could even tie it into the Azoth or any of these words that alchemists have used for years when it talks about a mysterious substance that is the essence of all life, right? Yeah. So maybe that's what this is. They're just presenting it as, this is Vrilia, but it's actually this substance that ties mankind or just ties the universe together. And I want to bring this up real quick before we jump to the next alien kind, but there was a book called Vril, The Power of the Coming Race in 1871. Edward Bulwer Lytton wrote it. And I've talked about it on the show before, but there's an interesting part that he writes in this book. Now, it's written as a fictional work, which a lot of these guys did, but they would be talking about things that are true because Helena Blavatsky read the book and she was the creator of Theosophy and she believed the Vril. She believed the book. She said that Edward wrote the book in full knowledge of what he was writing. He just wrote it as a fictional piece of work so that he could hide in plain sight what he was actually talking about. But the traveler in the book, when the traveler, he goes down into these caves because he's a mining engineer, he falls into this chasm. And when he gets down there, he meets these Vril and they look like angels. He uses that verbiage. And they have this telepathic ability and all these other abilities that they use. And at first he's kind of mad because he doesn't like the fact that they've evolved more than him. And they tell him about this substance. But he finds out that they are an antediluvian civilization that, check this, there was a massive flood coming. So they had to run and hide underground, their whole civilization, and protect their all-permeating fluid, this Vrilia. And you were talking about the women. The Vril women are actually the stronger and larger of the men, and they get married for 3 years. And then at that point, the men can either choose to be remarried or stay single, and the females can pursue a new husband, but generally they never do that. They actually mate for life. And this is a story that he tells, but I think that the telling piece is we're an antediluvian civilization that was on this earth, and there was a flood coming. So we had to go deep into the earth and hide so the flood wouldn't wipe us out. Now, if we're talking about tall, humanoid, very, very human-looking entities that are running from a flood, what does that correlate to at that point? Probably something Nephilim-based, if we're thinking that the flood came to wipe out a lot of these evil Nephilim. It just made me think of that, because they're telling the story of having to hide from this massive flood.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And protecting their precious.
Whatever that is.
Yeah.
But no, I mean,
The
hiding
Vril,
from a flood.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of talks about what that flood was supposed to wipe out.
Yeah. I think too, like Darren Kuyu, that place in Turkey, that underground city they recently discovered.
Was that the one that was buried on purpose?
No, that was Gobekli Tepe.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, Darren Kuyu's the underground like cave system, I guess, but they dug out and made like, marketplaces, living quarters. Like, it's gigantic.
They had farm animals in that one, right? Like they were actually rearing animals.
Like, I forget how many people it could support, but tens of thousands.
I think it was 75,000.
Yeah, it's a lot. Is this one of those cities? Is this one of those underground places that maybe? I don't know what that was built for. We don't know modernly. At least they're not telling us.
Well, they had to get all the Vril out first.
Oh yeah, the Vril pool at the bottom.
Because I think that's the one I'm thinking of. They couldn't figure out how they grew plants. Because it made animals, you could be like, well, animals need sunlight, kind of, but you can kind of get away with it a little bit.
Right. Yeah, you just need oxygen.
I mean,
really,
they had bellows systems, I think, in that one.
Yeah.
To pull oxygen all the way down to the bottom.
Which is nuts. Yeah.
But you need plants. So if you're hiding under there, you either have to be farming on top or farming in there or something.
Or you are, yeah.
Or you're throwing Vril on seeds and it just
exactly
instantly corn.
Yes. Correct.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I want to jump to another weird one shortly, and then we'll get to the real nasties that Justin loves more and more every day, the Greys. But I'm going to talk about this weird one called the Yahyel. Now, the name itself was weird to me because Yah, Y-A-H, is a short version of Yahweh, and El is also a Sumerian, Hebrew, a lot of those ancient dictations dictated as God. So in the name, it's pretty much saying big God, little God.
Yeah.
Is exactly what the name itself says. Now, when I was doing some research on it, I did find something kind of funny. There's a 5-piece indie pop band from Tokyo, Japan called Yah-El, and they use it because the word means alien, and they chose it because they are treated as an alien outside of Japan because they travel all the time. So I thought that was interesting that I don't know their correlation to these actual Yahyel, but clearly they know about them, that they named their entire band after this star seed race. And that's exactly what they're called. Now, this is going to blow your mind. They're a hybrid race, obviously, a mix of human DNA and Sassani genes. So the Sassani are a mix of human DNA and gray aliens. These are a mix of more human DNA and Sassani genes. So they're down the chain a little bit of hybrids. So if you pull up what they look like, I honestly feel like they're the creepiest of them all. They're like blonde-haired grays. And they have bluish skin. So I think I'd rather run up on a gray than these guys, just because I think the weird human hair and all that would really throw me off. But this is what they look like. And they say that their story ties closely to humanity's evolution. They said they're from a parallel Earth 300 years in the future. I don't know why they're all 3,000 years ahead of us. It's all threes. You can put that together if you want to, listening audience, because again, these Yahyel have a symbol, and guess what it is? It's a triangle. It is a triangle just like the rest of them. And These are very close to us in the humor aspect. They're lighthearted. They make jokes. They just want everybody to be happy. And their purpose in our lives are not just existing in some distant galaxy. They're deeply invested in Earth's spiritual growth. They act as guides, Mahatmas, secret chiefs, helping us navigate this chaotic yet beautiful journey we call life. If you've ever had a feeling of peace wash over you out of nowhere, or a moment of clarity during tough times, it could have been the Yahyel. They're all about nudging us toward becoming the best versions of ourselves. Oh, it all sounds great, right? They're trying to help us become better. But they don't talk like normal people, even though they're further down the human line. No, their communication styles, guess what? Telepathy. They're going to talk to your brain is how they're going to contact you and help you be able to meet this spirituality. But they use technology that works with nature, not against it. So the technology that they give people is a way to combine science and spirituality, and it creates tech that aligns with the universal laws, which I would attribute to sacred geometry, which you talked about earlier. So they're doing the same thing. And the lingo or the diatribes that are taught about these particular aliens is 4 star seeds. These are people who are born with the spark, right? They have some sort of alien DNA in them. You could attribute that to Nephilim bloodlines, whatever you want to say. To me, it's kind of the same pantheon. 4 star seeds, the Yah-El, are like our potential. Here it goes. We can ascend. We can become gods. Star seeds connected to the Yah-El often feel a deep desire to bridge gaps, whether that's between people, cultures, or even dimensions. It's about bringing harmony and creating a better world, one small action at a time. So these particular beings are actually connected to one of the most famous UFO sightings of all time, the Phoenix Lights. So these Yahyel are supposedly were a part of that massive UFO sighting that happened. And this is what these beings are telling people when they're connecting with them, that, oh, the Phoenix Light, that was us. Any kind of craft that looks like that, some sort of triangular craft that looks very similar to the Phoenix Lights, that's us. So again, back to the triangular ships and helping humanity, helping us evolve into the best version of ourselves. This is what these Yahyel are presenting themselves to be.
It makes me think of like all these, and including this one. It's like it makes me think of groups like Scientology, kind of, where it's a similar message repackaged in a different form, and then used to just gather, people and their thoughts and ideas, under one central thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's just a different version, a different mask, I guess, on the same idea.
These are the worst looking ones out of this whole list. Anybody, I highly suggest you Google them.
The most uncanny valley ones, maybe?
Yeah, I was going to talk about Uncanny Valley because I think genetically it's one of the genetic fears that humans have. But these just look like a shapeshifter that you just showed them a drawing of a person and they did their best. And when they ran into him, it's just like, I guess this is what a human kind of looks like.
And too, ain't it funny how like anything positive or good, it's like, oh yeah, we're a part of that.
We did that. Don't worry.
What about all the bad stuff that happens?
That's not us. That's a different department.
Yep. We could have helped, but
we were busy that day.
Yeah, we can't get involved. We can't interfere.
Gosh, no, Uncanny Valley. These are the worst looking ones. These maybe I didn't know at home. The real quick, fast definition. Humans have a genetic fear. Genetic fears are what I guess humans are genetically programmed to be scared of. Like most humans are afraid of snakes and are afraid of spiders because we lost enough ancestors that it's genetic fear. It's programmed to avoid those animals because of their potential danger. The Dark's another one. And then Uncanny Valley is another one where things that look between, and the Uncanny Valley comes from a Japanese scientist that kind of, I think, was it the 50s or 60s, kind of really nailed this down, what that actually means as far as the percentage. if something looks between 92 and 99% like a human, there's something in our brain that just screams, get away from this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be around it. This is bad. This is bad. So they make toys now based off of that. That's kind of why, not all the reasons, but like why Barbies and Bratz and all these things kind of look different enough from people. Because when we used to make dolls look really like people, that's why they freak people out.
Yeah.
So now when you make these kids' toys, and you never notice that, now they don't look like people.
Exaggerated features.
Yeah, extremely exaggerated features. And there's other reasons they do that. It's just, that is one of them. You know, because it freaks people out when you see the ones like the old doll styles where they were literally just people.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's why we're genetically programmed to fear these things, because they're bad. I mean, if that thing came out of the darkness to say, I'm here to help, I would put a dent so hard into its forehead. Because the big eyes that look like people eyes, and then the weird little wispy hair,
Mm-hmm.
it just screams something trying to pretend to be a human, and it's not doing a good job at it.
Yeah.
Like it peeled the head off of a girl and is wearing it. Like, I'm here to help. If you feel good, it's me.
Yeah. Not good. Don't trust it.
Dead.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the Yahyel are probably the creepiest of all of them because they're close enough to humans, but they look gray enough to freak you out. Like, gray's enough for terrifying, right? But I just think the mix of the two
Mm-hmm.
are what make it really creepy. And at that point, we're going to jump into the classics, the Greys, also referred to as the Zeta Reticulans, Roswell Greys or Greys. They are purported extraterrestrial beings. They're frequent subjects of close encounters and alien abduction claims. So you're going to see these guys a lot with the abduction parts. However, you will see Nordics alongside of them, sometimes reptilians alongside of them. So I think they're all kind of in the same grouping, probably the same type of things. And Greys are typically described as being human-like with small bodies, smooth gray skin, and large hairless heads, large black eyes. And they were really made popular by the Barney and Betty Hill abduction claim, which I'm going to have Justin tell briefly here in a second, because that's where the term Zeta Reticulans came from, was from this particular incident. And this is where people think they're from this planet of Zeta Reticuli. And this is where they come from. Now, they are very small. They're not in that even 5 foot range. They're more in that 3 foot, 3.5 foot range. And they are presented very differently depending on who meets them. Sometimes some people say that they seem more etheric. Some people think they're very physical and you could feel them touch you. But they all come across the same way, very cold, calculated, almost machine-like. That's why I lean very heavily into some of them being just host meat sacks that house whatever entities, negative entities that are around that are trying to attack humankind. And I believe that one of their main purposes is to abduct people to use the reproductive services of men and women to create some of these hybrids that maybe we even talked about today. Some of these hybrids could be hybridized versions of that experimentation. So I don't necessarily think that's not going on either. So yeah, we could say, oh, they're light beings, they're angels. Well, yeah, they could present themselves that way. And then I think the other side of it is there's a physical aspect too. And you see that a lot with the Greys. There's a heavy physical aspect. You were just talking, Justin, about the guy that pulled the lens off the alien's eye. And that's a very physical interaction.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could tell the story of the Hills and what happened there, because that's really the first story. I mean, obviously we know of Roswell and everything else that spawned out, but that was really the first time we heard the term Zeta Reticulans.
Yeah, so I'll give everybody at home the quick version of the Betty Barney Hill incident. I highly suggest, we've done episodes, but other podcasts have done episodes. It's one of the most, there's plenty of documentaries to watch on it. It's one of the most fascinating things in ufology in modern day because of the documentation associated with it. It also has heavy connections with the Men in Black, and like the Men in Black, that was one of the big kickoffs. Because it killed Barney. This whole thing really did. So Barney was a black man, and he held power in his town. He was the postmaster, in a time when, first off, he married a white woman, Betty. They weren't supposed to be an interracial couple, as you know. This is right after right during some civil rights stuff. It's a crazy time for a black man to hold power in a local town. And the local town liked him a lot. Just on the outside of that, they really didn't. I mean, there was a lot of KKK members after Barney. And then Betty was this free spirit, not hippie, but I don't know what else to call it, free spirit. She loved aliens. She loved UFOs. Barney lived a tortured existence, constantly hunted. Several KKK members have attacked him for his position in power and marrying a white woman. So they got the inclination to go to Niagara Falls out of nowhere. So they get in the car, they go to Niagara Falls. On the way back, there's this weird roadblock that they cannot really remember, and they can't describe the people that they talk to very easily. They go down, they pull over to, I think the dog had to pee, if I remember right. So they let the dog out, and then they start hearing noises. And Barney goes to the trunk. He has a gun there. He thinks it's like local KKK members after them or something like that. So Barney's in this state of mind of fearfulness. And Betty's, excited. They see the UFO. Now this is where the story splits, because Betty and Barney Hill had extremely different experiences from the UFO sighting. They both seen the UFO at the same time, and that's kind of where the story, you got to talk about them separately. Betty gets led into the UFO by the captain, a very cordial, little gray creature. And I believe, depending on which rendition you hear, they either had spandex or he had something loose to set him off from the other ones. Not a big crown or nothing like that, but you could tell he was a different rank than everybody else. And he's showing Betty around. He shows her star maps, and you mentioned Zeta Reticuli, which I believe is a binary star system. And this is, way before we knew that kind of stuff could exist. Binary star system means two stars in one solar system where they're not eating each other. They're put in balance. So Betty's showing these star maps and all this stuff, and she's given a book that gets taken back from her before she leaves. And Betty has a really hippy-dippy experience. Barney was, for all intents and purposes, tortured and raped. He was strapped down. He had stuff put on his genitals that left permanent scarring. And to one doctor, the best he said, they're genital warts, but not sexually transmitted genital warts. He didn't know what they were from. Barney hated his experience. Like, he was literally strapped down, raped, tortured, and then put in a car. They wake up, missing time. They don't remember any of this for days. They wake up in the car driving like another 3 hours, towards home. Betty was missing a pair of earrings and several other items. They get home several days later. I think it was like a hoodie, not a hoodie, like a sweater and a pair of earrings were folded on the kitchen table. And then it kind of starts coming back to them what actually happened during this. So the creatures they seen were exactly the same. Betty and Barney described the creatures. It was vastly different experiences. And this gets to, some of our theories is the psychedelic side of this stuff where mindset may matter. And I don't know, grays are bad. If you add up all of the gray experiences we have, 99% of them are horrible. It's very hard to find a positive experience with a gray. Like Joel had already mentioned, they are heavily associated with tons and tons of other extraterrestrial species. People have different opinions on whether they're meat suits, whether they're hive insects, whether they're, they may, like, that's one big one, that they may be hive type creatures to where the individual doesn't matter. It's all a collective thing. Or they're built slaves, or they're built workers. They're very cold and calculating. You cannot sympathize with them. These are creatures or things or beings that there's behind those black eyes, there's not ever emotion. Several people from, like we talked about Daryl fighting them they don't care. Like, if you heard them, like Stardust Ranch and several of the other ranches, they kill Greys and they just kind of disappear. By the kill, I mean they cut them up.
Yeah.
And they don't care.
And it's not like a localized phenomenon. It's literally all over the world.
Yeah,
Greys.
I mean, yeah, this is the worst one because it just what they're doing is kind of under the umbrella. Like they try to mask it as scientific study.
Mhm.
Like Joel said, they open you up, they take eggs, they put stuff in you, and when we talk about impregnation, it's almost always 4 or 5 months when they come back and reharvest. It's pretty universal that around that time. There's a couple of real famous ones from the U.S. where the doctors had confirmed that she did have a baby and she did not have a miscarriage or an abortion, and the baby disappeared at 5 months. And I mean, I can't remember the name of that one, but that's on. I think UFO Files did a whole hour episode on that lady because there was so much documentation with her. And then later on, she said that they let her revisit and seen her kids, and they looked like I can't say the word, but the Y ones.
Yahyel or
Yahyel. When she described him and she drew pictures of her quote unquote kids, they really look like that. But she was also a blonde lady, so I don't know if that's genetic or they all have blonde hair.
Right. Yeah.
Greys are horrible. Greys are these little machine-like beings that just are cold and unfeeling. Like anybody that we've talked to that experienced the Greys, true Greys. We've talked about Grey-like things this whole episode, the last 2 hours. But these true Greys, just everybody that I've talked to, it sounds horrible. Even people that are excited to be abducted by them, the process does not sound like science. It sounds like torture masked as science.
I was just saying, I watched a video just last night of this guy talking about Zulu tribes in South Africa. Under their loincloths, they'd wear like a cup-like device, basically, to protect their manhood, their genitals, basically, because they said that they had drawings and paintings and stuff of these Greys that would come for their members of their tribe and stuff, and extract the semen from them. And it was like torturous and torture is the best way they described it. But they would rather wear these cups and wear them all night to protect themselves from these entities. That's what the guy said.
I believe. There's the Clinton abduction, which is another one of the most famous abductions in U.S. history because it was Bill Clinton happened to be at a hotel that a Grey abductee conference was happening in. It's halfway between a conference and a comfort group. For half the people were there because they hated their experience and they just want to talk to somebody, not feel crazy, right? Yeah. Because if you're there and everybody's had a Grey experience, you don't feel nuts. And the other half were excited about it. So a quick synopsis of this story because it's just one that makes me laugh because it shows you how nasty the Greys are. There was this guy, I'll just call him Ted for the story. In this circle, he was hated. He was kind of obnoxious and everything like that. But they all shared hotel rooms to make it cheaper because it was a big hotel. Like Bill Clinton was staying there in secret. So this other guy had to share the room. He basically drew the short straw. Okay, I'm sharing the room with Ted. Okay. And he wakes up and he sees Greys in the corners of the room. And he kind of turns his head and he sees them floating Ted in the air and just basically torturing him for fun. And he looks over and there's a Grey standing over him he didn't notice before. And he can't talk. And he's just he's starting to hyperventilate. And the alien goes over, Grey looks over. He's like, oh, don't worry. We're not going to do that to you. We don't like him. Like, what? Yeah. We're just torturing him because you don't like him?
Yeah. That's just great.
And then the other guy, he's like, oh, I felt comforted by that. What? They're over there just shocking him with a cattle prod. Oh, we don't like him. He's annoying when we start taking out his reproductive organs. No, Greys are horrible.
I think the wild part of that story is that Bill Clinton was there in secret. So you've got this president who's there while this is happening. And again, there's some ulterior motive with these beings and their connection with governments for sure. And I'd be remiss to not talk about two of the earlier descriptions of these Grey aliens, which was far before we had Roswell and the Hills. But H.G. Wells talks about them in 1895 in his book, The Time Machine. And he calls them the Eloi, E-L-O-I. So we're here with the Yahyel again, that God. And he says they're a successor species to humanity. He describes them as having no mouths, noses, or hair, with large heads and large eyes. So H.G. Wells was really good at also writing fiction, but talking about truths in his fiction. And we can go to 1917, and we won't get into the deeper part of the story because I've talked about it plenty of times on the show, but Aleister Crowley, when he was doing the Amalancha workings in New York, he met a entity named Lamb, which was kind of the first modern drawing of what we know of the Greys now. So the Greys have been around for a while. At least the archetype of them has been around for centuries. We've seen, hieroglyphs and paintings on cave walls where they pop up in the past. But the modern version of them really started hitting in the mid-1940s. But we can say that H.G. Wells and Crowley were kind of the precursors to bringing that to more of the modern viewpoint of what they are. Now, I will say that a lot of the modern ufologists now, like John Keel, and he talks about millions of people been affected, at least temporarily, by UFO contact, and thousands have gone insane and ended up in mental institutions after their experiences with these things began. He's speaking specifically about Greys, and he says there's been too many reliable and multiple witnesses for it to be faked, which I completely agree with as well. And he attributes, check this out now, and then this is a very modern ufologist, and if you talk to a lot of ufologists down to the nitty gritty, really get to what it is, and he talks about the UFO manifestations seem to be, by and large, merely minor variations of the age-old demonological phenomena. Officialdom may feel that if we ignore them long enough, they will go away altogether, taking their place with the vampire myths of the Middle Ages. So he attributes the modern Grey abduction sequences to demonology, to demonic possession, to demonic entities taking these people away. Jacques Vallée talks about it as well. Such contact includes abductions, ordeal, including surgical operations and sexual intercourse with the aliens. It often leaves marks and scars on the body and mind, as do UFO abductions. And he talks about how that they are attributed in the form of angels, demons, elves, and sylphs. So he says it's the modern version of that. These are all highly accredited ufologists and guys who are very accredited in their scientific fields in general, who have said that the modern UFO phenomenon seems eerily similar to demonic possessions in the past, and even demonic possessions now, in my opinion. But I just think it's the new mask. Like you said earlier, this is just the new mask that they're putting on, and this is what is happening. You've got two ends of it. You've got this negative Grey who's coming out the gate just attacking, right? It's what they do. But then you've got the offshoots of them who are tricking people in another way. Oh, we're here to give you enlightenment. We're here to expand your mind, evolve you. You can become us. So you've got all these different types of seductions and trickery going on at the same time. It's just a bombardment. And I say this a lot, where you can look at negative aspects of Christianity and any religion for that matter. And I believe that, especially in Christianity, the negative aspects that just seems to pop out in people's minds, especially people that aren't Christians, are pushed by these negative entities. They are pushing these things to make this thing, which at its core is a good thing, but deter everybody away from it. But then on the other end, make all these occult practices and becoming these gods attractive. Oh, come over here, though. This is negative here. Don't be a part of this, but come over here and be a part of this, because this is where you really need to be. You can ascend to these different levels and become an ascended master.
Yeah, I'm a big believer these things are demons. The Greys specifically, the whole Grey phenomena. I mean, the torture aspects. I don't use the word lightly, but if you really get into some of these eyewitnesses, but the rape aspect to a lot of this stuff, it does not seem like a scientific thing, whatsoever. I really think these, at least the Greys and the Grey-like entities, are demons in some way, shape, or form with the new mask, and like we talked about earlier, they don't want to look like demons because then that proves, in most humans, if demons are real, then that must mean angels are real, and that means everything else is real. So if you go with these look of aliens, like, oh, aliens, that doesn't mean anything for, I guess, religious aspect or anything like that. Yeah, so I think the moral of the story is if you see a Grey, punch it as hard as you can in the head.
Funny enough, I know Tony had a guy on one of his member episodes that did the whole, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. Apparently, he got abducted and was put on a ship, and he was on a table, and he woke up, and they were all around him, and he just started punching them and fighting them, which was pretty hilarious. But he did say they tackled him. He said they tackled him. They kept piling on top of him like ants on an ant hill or like on a piece of food. And he said they eventually subdued him. But I thought it was pretty funny. Whether it's real or not, I don't know. But that would be my reaction. Punch it in the head and try to keep moving. But guys, I really appreciate you guys coming on the show today. I had a blast. This was a fun episode. And I love talking alien stuff, and I haven't got to do it in a while. So I was like, you know what? Let's get the biologist and the clone on the show, and let's talk about some interesting alien stuff. But if you can, guys, before we get out of here, let everybody know where to find you.
You can find us on all of our information on cryptidsofthecorn.com. We've got live shows coming up in the near future, so check that out for tickets and information and whatnot. And we have our big festival event coming up in October, Ohio Bigfoot Jamboree 2.
Yeah, if you want the book, you can get it on the website, or you can get it on Amazon if you're international. It is much cheaper. I mean, nobody likes supporting Amazon, but if you're getting one in Australia or the Netherlands or something like that, it's just cheaper to get one on Amazon. Anything else?
If you're local, though, buy the book from our website, and you may even get a custom jellyfish drawn inside.
You can. I will draw one in there if you ask for it. It has a little check mark for that.
There you go.
No, thank you, Joel, for having us. It's an honor, like always. So much fun hanging out with you.
All right, guys, on the way out, I'm playing my new single called Spinning. And you know what it is, guys. Go outside, touch grass, and get your tail out the hole.
Sometimes I feel alone when I'm looking at myself, cause I look down the road full of bottles, broken nails. So I just try to call, swerving off the road. I used to do it for the roses, adulation, so they noticed. Used to say they weren't my focus, lying jonesing for the Joneses things. I know that everything that's going on can start to overwhelm, like the war on terror is just a war within ourselves. Are you woke or are you awake? Genuine or are you fake? I'm feeling like I'm sent by UPS with all the tape. These boxes are all made by delusions that we chase, but I'm just staying based. Snakes are slithering, they keep it snake. She coming with the cake, but how it's baked is important, but so is what you bring. Cause being real ain't acting like a king. I feel I'm spinning round and about to crash. Chaos all around, ain't feeling trapped. All this pressure mounts, I wanna crack. Like I'm going around in circles. Like I'm going around in circles. Like I'm going around, like I'm going around. Like I'm going around in circles. Like I'm going around. It's hard for me to bother. Look at leashes on the collars of these people. Follow monsters like a magua in the water, then they multiply. It's easy to get bitter. I'd rather dosify, I'd rather justify anything but selling me. Leave me alone with the mic like a spelling bee. Smoking guns in your face, but you disagree. I ain't have to change your mind, I'm just hoping that you'll listen. I'm just hoping that a little bit of what I'm saying will make you take a second and see that everything ain't adding up. I know it's hard, I know it's hard. I feel I'm spinning round and about to crash. Chaos all around, ain't feeling trapped. All this pressure mounts, I wanna crack. Like I'm going around in circles. Like I'm going around in circles.